From the ashes of this world, I will build a better one.
The X-Men villain Apocalypse is all about survival of the fittest, so when he's looking for new servants to be his Horsemen of Apocalypse, he's looking for certified powerhouses, and across the grand old history of mutantkind, he's chosen some good ones. While you might know about the more famous Horsemen like Wolverine and Gambit, there have been many others who served Apocalypse as War, Death, Famine, and Pestilence, including the likes of, believe it or not, Spider-Man. That's why in this video, we're going to be discussing the top 10 most powerful, beyond Omega level Horsemen of Apocalypse who can level entire cities. So, without further ado, let's get right into it.
The Sentry. Robert Reynolds, Horseman of Death. Let's talk about the sun for a second, that huge ball of heat and fire where nuclear fusion takes place continuously. At its core, the temperatures reach a massive 15 million degrees Celsius, and the pressure is so intense that hydrogen atoms slam together to form helium atoms, and every fusion of these tiny atoms turns into massive amounts of radiant energy and light. Now imagine the sun exploded. Of course, all that energy would be released in a single burst that would create ripples not only across our solar system, but also other solar systems. So when people say that Robert Reynolds, aka the Sentry, holds within himself the power of 1 million exploding suns, you should probably start paying attention. I mean, I can't even imagine the extent of that much power. Not only would it level cities, it would damage entire quadrants of galaxies. But the thing is, before becoming a hero, Sentry was actually just a drug addict, one with extremely strange luck. Bob discovered an experimental super soldier formula called the Golden Sentry Serum, which granted him immeasurable abilities. He then became the Sentry and found a place as a beloved hero within the growing superhero community, and the man even had his own sidekick named Scout. However, Bob's fractured mind eventually created the Void, a dark entity that served as his greatest enemy and balanced every good act he performed as the Sentry. Once the Void pushed him beyond his limits, Bob worked with Mr. Fantastic and Dr. Strange to erase all memory of the Sentry from the world. That included Bob's own memories, as this was the only way they could prevent the Void from returning. This was the lead-up to the Sentry's first appearance. He was a superhero nobody remembered, locked away in the raft for reasons he couldn't explain. Eventually, the heroes dragged him back to the spotlight, but when Norman Osborn took control of S.H.I.E.L.D. and turned it into Hammer, he ran his own Dark Avengers and manipulated the Sentry to being on his team. Eventually, this would lead to the Sentry's death in the Siege event at the hands of Thor, but that death wouldn't last forever. The Apocalypse twins would later resurrect the Sentry through the combined powers of a Life Seed and a Death Seed, and he would go on to become the Horseman of Death. But Bob's fractured mental state started exacerbating after his resurrection, so much so that he started seeing himself as none other than Apocalypse's rightful heir. He slammed down a bunch of heroes, including Thor, but Thor helped him understand that the Apocalypse twins secretly wanted to destroy Earth, and he urged Sentry to help stop them. Despite his madness, Bob still considered himself to be a protector of humanity, so he agreed to help defeat the Celestial named Exitar the Executioner, and also decided to take the dead Celestial's body far away from Earth. But before he left, he warned the good guys that the Celestials would answer the death of one of their own with a terrible vengeance. The Incredible Hulk, Bruce Banner, Horseman of War. There was a time where Apocalypse manipulated Bruce Banner into becoming War, and as you already know, becoming a Horseman involves receiving a whole bunch of upgrades from Apocalypse. However, this time, he also needed Apocalypse to remove shrapnel lodged inside his brain. That was the Hulk's singular demand. On top of that, Warhulk also received celestial armor, a sword that could cut through anything, and a whip that could catch speedsters. All of this meant that Hulk's already ridiculous rage-fueled strength increased even further. Absorbing Man and Juggernaut were sent to stop him, but the Hulk dominated both these powerhouses and nearly killed them. However, Bruce Banner's friend, Rick Jones, intervened, and the Hulk struck at him. Once Hulk saw the crippled body of his best friend, the shock broke him free of Apocalypse's control, but Hulk was ashamed of what he had done, so he fled the scene. Despite this, Apocalypse couldn't have done much better for his Horseman of War than the Hulk. Bruce Banner's exposure to gamma radiation transformed him into the Hulk and altered his entire physiology. The mutation strengthened his cellular structure and added more than 800 pounds of bone marrow and muscle tissue to his body. Stressful situations turn Banner into the Hulk, and once he's the Hulk, he's almost always surrounded by stress. As it happens, that stress also causes the Hulk's adrenaline to rise, which in turn increases his physical power. Basically, the greater his anger, the greater his strength, and it seems that Hulk's fury and physical power don't really have any limit as such. Spider-Man once devised a hierarchy of physical power, and according to him, Hulk topped the list and was placed by Spidey above both Thor and Hercules. Amadeus Cho, one of the smartest humans on Earth, also believed that a team-up of fighters on Hercules' level would have been useless against an enraged Hulk. At one point, a fully animalistic Hulk managed to match 2 groups of Avengers, despite the fact that his strength had begun to decline. Those teams included Namor, the Submariner, Hercules, Wonder Man, and Iron Man. Namor, who's not exactly a lightweight, would later argue that no power on Earth could have stopped the Hulk if he ever returned at full rage, and Cho noted that Hulk had the opportunity to destroy everyone during World War Hulk. In that event, he took down Black Bolt, Doctor Strange, the Avengers, the X-Men, pretty much the entire planet. He turned a stadium in downtown New York into a gladiatorial arena and forced the Illuminati to fight to death. If that's not enough to convince you, at a conference he arranged with the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and some other heroes, Strange warned that if Banner ever lost all control, the Hulk could be one of the greatest threats they ever faced. So turning this guy into war was a pretty smart move on Apocalypse's part. Too bad he underestimated how difficult it is to control the Hulk. Wolverine, Logan, Horseman of Death. During one of their multiple space missions, the X-Men lost Logan to Apocalypse, who abducted him and replaced him with a Skrull, who infiltrated the team by assuming Wolverine's identity. Meanwhile, Apocalypse forced Logan and Sabretooth to compete for the Mantle of Death, but Wolverine understood that he had a better chance of resisting Apocalypse's mental control than Sabretooth. He also knew that Sabretooth would become way more dangerous if Apocalypse enhanced him. So Logan fought his old enemy and won the role of Horseman of Death for himself. After the battle, Apocalypse achieved what Genesis had previously failed to accomplish and bonded adamantium back onto Logan's skeleton. Wolverine then became Death, completed several missions for Apocalypse, and even fought the Hulk. Meanwhile, the Skrull imposter tried to create conflict between the X-Men and their mentor. Apocalypse eventually ordered the real Wolverine to kill his replacement, and Logan obeyed. Once the team discovered that their Wolverine was a Skrull, they learned that Apocalypse had controlled the real Logan and tried to rescue him. As Death, Wolverine attacked the X-Men with little restraint. However, Psylocke, Archangel, Kitty Pryde, and Jubilee eventually helped him break Apocalypse's control. Sadly, Logan barely had any time to recover before he witnessed the death of Colossus, who sacrificed himself to eradicate the legacy virus. But wait, we didn't even talk about the upgrades Wolverine got, right? In addition to returning his adamantium to him, Apocalypse also equipped Wolverine with the Death Sword, and this weapon was absurdly powerful. It was so strong it could deflect Cyclops' optic blasts and pierce the Hulk's skin and muscle. Furthermore, it could launch psionic attacks strong enough to disable powerful telepaths such as Jean Grey for short periods. Logan also wore death armor, which concealed his identity and protected him on missions. The armor could survive explosions as well as Cyclops' optic blasts. It also resisted attacks from Colossus, Rogue, and even the Hulk. So yeah, if you ask us, Death is the most dangerous form that Wolverine has ever taken. Archangel, Horseman of Death. After a sequence of unfortunate events, Warren Worthington III came under Apocalypse's total control. Inside his celestial ship, Apocalypse altered Warren's body and mind before placing him among his horsemen as the Horseman of Death. Warren's skin turned blue, while biometallic wings emerged from his back. These wings could retract and fire razor-sharp darts coated with a neurotoxin, and they also allowed him to fly faster and higher than before. Apocalypse forced the Horsemen to fight for leadership, and Death defeated every rival. Warren then attacked X-Factor and captured the team before the Horsemen entered Manhattan to cause widespread destruction. However, Iceman eventually broke Apocalypse's hold by creating an ice sculpture of himself and allowing Warren to destroy it, tricking Death into believing he had killed his friend, and the shock from this fake assassination actually restored Warren's senses. As Archangel, Warren retained the techno-organic wings that Apocalypse had given him. Their metal feathers could be launched as flechettes, strike with the force of bullets, and even pierce steel. Warren could also propel himself through solid objects and tear them apart. The metal wings eventually molted and revealed feathered wings underneath, although it was later said that these wings only appeared organic. After Warren lost them for a second time, his techno-organic wings returned, along with his blue skin. However, once he killed those responsible for the loss of his organic wings, he reverted to his original angel form. However, stress could still trigger his violent Archangel form, and Warren didn't really have complete control over it. Later, Warren would serve X-Man as part of the Horsemen of Salvation. X-Man wanted to force the world into a mutant utopia and transformed Warren into his Horseman of Life. Nowadays, Warren seems to be able to change into his Archangel persona at will, occasionally using it for Black Ops missions for the X-Men. Still, it's a perfect example of how Apocalypse's evil tainted one of the oldest X-Men members forever. Gambit, Remy LeBeau, Horseman of Death. After Apocalypse's return in the aftermath of M-Day, he basically started telling people that he wanted to restore mutantkind to its former glory, and while that may have been true, it was always for his own twisted purposes. Gambit, however, feeling isolated from the X-Men and fearing mutant extinction, came to him believing he might actually be the savior of their people. Apocalypse then selected Remy as his new Horseman of Death. Gambit refused sedation during the transformation process because he wanted to make sure that Apocalypse couldn't alter his mind. Unfortunately, that precaution achieved very little success, as the process still turned him into a servant of Apocalypse. However, a small part of Remy survived, despite the whole Death persona. He remembered his love for Rogue and insisted that he was both Death and Gambit. Following a battle with the X-Men, Gambit fell unconscious and was ferried away by his teammate, Sunfire, who at that point was the Horseman Famine. Sunfire had escaped Apocalypse's mental control with the help of Emma Frost. When Remy awoke inside a Japanese temple, Sunfire encouraged him to abandon Apocalypse, as well as the X-Men and his former life. The pair then attacked the X-Mansion to recover Polaris, another Horseman. Unfortunately, Gambit proved how far he had fallen when he attempted to kill Rogue. Their assault failed, so they returned to the Buddhist temple in Japan, but Mr. Sinister met them there and offered to remove Apocalypse's control. Sinister allegedly succeeded, although Gambit's Death personality and altered appearance returned at intervals for several months. A long period eventually passed without another transformation. As Death, Gambit could transform ordinary air into poisonous gas. He could create toxic clouds or convert the oxygen already inside someone's lungs, which was frankly a horrifying upgrade for a man who already carried explosive cards. His new Death charge also worked differently from his usual kinetic energy. Any card infused with it could destroy organic matter upon contact and completely disintegrate a victim. Furthermore, Death appeared to be able to direct those cards towards targets through mental control. Remy also gained greater resistance to psychic attacks. For instance, when Death took control, Input's telepathic distortions could no longer fool or distract him. Finally, when the Death persona returned in Limbo, Gambit showed how he now had the power to corrupt creatures and force them under his command. Polaris, Horseman of Pestilence. Polaris became Apocalypse's Horseman of Pestilence during X-Men Volume 2, Issue 183. This was a part of the Blood of Apocalypse arc, where her transformation began when a strange dupe-like creature named Dap abducted Lorna and carried her into the air before dropping her inside Ensaba Nur's Sphinx. Dap's true nature and loyalties are unclear to this day, and, it may have served Apocalypse, or the Sphinx's systems may have pulled it towards the ship. In fact, there's also a possibility that Dap wasn't even a real creature and had instead come from Apocalypse's celestial technology. Whatever the truth may be, Lorna ended up as Apocalypse's prisoner. Apocalypse offered her greater power if she accepted the role of Pestilence, and although she initially refused, Apocalypse eventually tempted Lorna into submission, and after he erased her memories, she absorbed viruses taken from the World Health Organization and began to create a meta-plague. During the final battle between Apocalypse, the X-Men, and the Avengers, Wolverine grabbed Pestilence by the throat, and that's how he discovered that she was in fact Lorna. Fortunately for her and everybody else, Havoc had received a serum that protected him from the diseases inside her body, so he managed to resuscitate her. While Lorna recovered at the X-Mansion, Gambit and Sunfire arrived to take her with them, but the woman refused. Emma Frost later revealed that Lorna's powers had begun to change. Apocalypse had fused unknown technology with her nervous system, which replicated the magnetic abilities she had lost. As Pestilence, Polaris could absorb diseases and infections into her body. These included viruses like SARS, smallpox, and the influenza strain strain from World War I, and she could also consume bacterial diseases such as cholera, anthrax, and the bubonic plague. Lorna then combined these illnesses into one meta-plague capable of causing pneumonia, severe diarrhea, and sepsis. Furthermore, she could even alter the plague so it harmed humans while leaving mutants unaffected. Had she released it, the disease could have wiped out humanity, but yeah, the X-Men are still standing, so it's safe to say that that never happened. Colossus. Pyotr Rasputin, Horseman of War. Several months after Colossus left the X-Men for a peaceful life in Russia, his little sister Illyana convinced him to return. The Mpox outbreak had forced mutant refugees into X-Haven, and the team needed his help, so much for retirement. Storm later sent Colossus to Tokyo with 4 young mutants under his care: Anole, Ernst, Glob Herman, and Nogger. Their mission was to investigate 600 new mutant signatures that had suddenly appeared inside a warehouse. When they arrived, they found Sugar Man with an ark containing 600 mutant embryos. He had genetically engineered them in total isolation from the Terrigen Mists, which meant they remained safe from Mpox. Sugar Man planned to transport the ark into the future, where the embryos could grow into the next generation of mutants under his leadership. However, Colossus and his students interrupted the plan and were transported into the future with the Ark instead of Sugar Man. They arrived on Omega World, where the Horsemen of Apocalypse attacked them immediately. Colossus remained behind so the young X-Men could escape, but Apocalypse captured him and transformed him into War. For the next year, Colossus hunted his former students because Apocalypse wanted Sugar Man's Ark, and the X-Men eventually entered Apocalypse's kingdom to recover the Ark and rescue Pyotr, although the Horsemen ambushed them. Illyana knocked her brother unconscious and brought him back to the past alongside Apocalypse. However, Apocalypse then transported Colossus to Clan Aqaba. The X-Men later found Pyotr and returned him to X-Haven as Nightcrawler finally tricked Apocalypse into reversing the transformation, restoring Colossus to normal. As War, Colossus had received major enhancements. His metallic body could behave like fluid steel, which allowed him to alter its shape, size, and volume. He could extend long prehensile tentacles from his body and use them as flails to throw people around. He could also enlarge his limbs, which made his attacks far more powerful. Apocalypse also protected his mind from telepathic attacks. When Jean Grey tried to enter his thoughts, Colossus explained that Apocalypse had made his mind as impenetrable as his metal body, which was definitely a pretty cool move. Sunfire, Shiro Yoshida, Horseman of Famine. After Sunfire lost his limbs, members of Clan Yoshida and the Hand placed him under guard inside a private infirmary. They urged him to accept prosthetic replacements, but Shiro had lost all desire to live and asked only for a sword to end his misery. That's when a newly resurrected Apocalypse visited with an offer he couldn't refuse. The deal was that if Sunfire joined his mission to save mutantkind, Apocalypse would restore both his powers and limbs. Shiro would also receive a chance to take revenge on those who had maimed him, and considering all that, Shiro ended up accepting the offer. However, Sunfire immediately started to regret this deal, like even before Apocalypse could complete the transformation. Naturally, he tried to fight free and quickly defeated Ozymandias before trying to escape the pyramid ship, but then Shiro refused to leave Gazer behind to suffer the same fate. Unfortunately, Gazer had already become War, and Apocalypse transformed Shiro into Famine soon afterwards. As Famine, Sunfire gained 2 major abilities. The first was Solar Hunger, which allowed him to alter his light patterns so they would affect the optic nerves of his foes and convince the brain that their body was starving. The second ability was Bio-Oxygen Generation, which allowed him to create oxygen, which meant he could breathe and sustain his flames in places without oxygen, including deep space. When Gazer attempted to recover him, Sunfire proved that he had escaped Apocalypse's mental control and refused to return. He later fled the mansion, but joined the X-Men for their final battle against Apocalypse at the United Nations. After Apocalypse escaped, however, Sunfire used his intense flames to purge his influence from Gambit, who had become Death. We already mentioned how the pair of them tried to recruit Polaris, the Horseman of Pestilence, but she rejected them, so they returned to Japan, where Mr. Sinister offered to purge all of Apocalypse's influence and even give them a new purpose as part of his Marauders. Banshee, Sean Cassidy, Horseman of Death. Following the events of X-Men Deadly Genesis in 2006, Sean Cassidy remained dead for years. He would return temporarily on a few occasions, but his resurrection finally became permanent in 2013's Uncanny Avengers number 9. So Banshee returned to life, but his mind and body belonged to the Apocalypse twins. Under their control, Sean attacked former allies such as Havoc, Wolverine, and Sunfire from the Avengers Unity Squad. When Sunfire began to burn him alive, Banshee begged for mercy and proved that he had no control over his actions. The twins were eventually defeated, and the Avengers took Sean Cassidy into custody. In 2014's Uncanny Avengers number 23, Beast began to examine his condition and figured out that the cosmic energy from the Death Seed would require years to remove, so Banshee remained in a coma and disappeared from major events. Sean finally awoke in 2018's Astonishing X-Men number 13 after the Reavers attacked Beast's laboratory. The X-Men released him so he could help, although the nanotechnology used to remove the Death Seed had left him with a corpse-like appearance. He refused to speak and used his voice only for sonic screams. Following this, Banshee would occasionally aid the X-Men, but often abandoned them and flew away. He eventually began to speak again before he left to understand his condition alone. By 2019's Uncanny X-Men number 15, Sean was looking much worse. He had joined the Mutant Liberation Front, appeared drained of life, and rarely spoke. Banshee would briefly return to the X-Men before being killed by a giant sentinel. However, in House of X number 1, Sean Cassidy was restored through Krakoa's resurrection protocols and returned to full health. After years as a corpse, a controlled horseman, and a half-restored version of himself, Banshee finally got his place back among the X-Men. Spider-Man, Horseman of Pestilence. Across the Marvel multiverse and its many timelines, Apocalypse has corrupted countless heroes and mutants into his horsemen, and not even Peter Parker was immune to Apocalypse's efforts because 2 alternate versions of Peter Parker actually ended up as Pestilence. The first appeared in the 2005 Cable and Deadpool story, Enema of the State. Deadpool, Cannonball, and Siren traveled through several realities in search of a dimensionally displaced Cable. One of these universes had completely fallen under Apocalypse's control. Soon after the trio arrived, Deadpool faced an Archangel who had fully accepted his role as Death. Apocalypse's other horsemen included Blob as Famine and Cable as War. However, the strangest member was a mutated Spider-Man serving as Pestilence. This Peter had clearly spent time as Spider-Man because he still wore the costume. However, he had developed extra arms and legs that remained part of his body. Deadpool handled Death without much trouble, but Pestilence proved harder to escape. He fired webs from his multiple limbs and quickly trapped Deadpool before he threatened to, quote-unquote, suck the marrow from his bones. Cannonball then caught Pestilence off guard, despite Peter's spider sense, but still, the heroes never truly defeated these horsemen. They only delayed them long enough for Deadpool to activate a body slide and escape, which left this corrupted Peter trapped in Apocalypse's universe. The second Pestilence appeared through the possible futures explored in 2010's Avengers issues number 1 through 6 during the next Avengers story. Kang warned the Avengers that their future children had endangered reality, so the team created a space-time continuum viewer. Basically, the time stream had been broken, and several possible universes collided with the main Marvel reality. In one future, Apocalypse had conquered the Earth with Red Hulk as War, Wolverine as Death, Scarlet Witch as Famine, and Spider-Man as Pestilence. This version of Peter looked even less human. His lower body was fused with a horse-like creature capable of flight, which gave him a centaur-like form. His white body had razor-sharp fingers, while 6 spider-like limbs extended from his back and transformed into weapons, much like a symbiote. His appearance suggested that Apocalypse had broken Peter and possibly fused him with a symbiote. Unlike the usual talkative Spider-Man, this version remained silent as he attacked Captain America and Hawkeye, while their attacks barely affected him back. A later cameo during an all-new X-Men multiverse story suggested that this version of Pestilence still exists out there somewhere, but that's a story for another day. That said, that's all we got for you this time, folks, but if you liked this video, please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons because that's the best way to get more content like this. Plus, those 2 small clicks help us tremendously in bringing you more of these awesome videos, so we'd really appreciate it as well. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time. But until then, as a wise man once said, Excelsior.